Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming back to the Love and Betrayal channel. Today, I have a new and quite interesting story to share with you, The Wife and the Woman He Hides. They say silence is peaceful, but when you live in it long enough, it becomes something else. It becomes a noise louder than shouting, a reminder that something is missing. And for me, that something was my husband. My name is Emma Wade, 32, married for 6 years, graphic designer, part-time painter, no kids, no pets, no messy exes. Just quiet. Too quiet. My husband's name is Ethan. He's a finance executive, whatever that means. Gone most days before I wake up, home long after I've fallen asleep. He says he works late because he's building our future. Funny, I barely feel like I'm part of his present. The first message came on a Thursday. Just as I finished brushing my teeth, phone buzzed. Unknown number. Do you ever wonder who he's really texting at night? I stared at the screen, heartbeat slowing, confused, unsettled. I replied, "Who is this?" No response. I showed it to Ethan when he came home. He looked annoyed, not concerned. Probably spam, or one of your weird art friends pulling a joke. That was Ethan's way. Deflect, dismiss, disappear. I wanted to believe him, but the message echoed in my head for days. Every time he turned his phone face down, every time he said, "This meeting can't wait," every time he smiled at me like a stranger being polite. And then came the second message. Unknown number. She wears red lipstick. You don't. That's why he notices her. I didn't wear lipstick, never had. Ethan once told me red wasn't my color, that I looked better soft, neutral, quiet. So I listened. I listened a lot in our marriage, to his preferences, his routines, his silences. But suddenly, I realized I didn't know what I liked anymore. That night, I searched his pockets. Not out of jealousy, out of something worse, curiosity. And in the side pocket of his blazer, I found a receipt. La Lumiere, a restaurant I'd never been to. Expensive romantic. Dated last week. A single meal, 2 drinks, 1 dessert. No business meeting has creme brulee. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I Googled the restaurant, looked at the photos, imagined him sitting across from a woman in red lipstick, laughing, leaning in, and I wondered, when did I stop being that woman? Or was I ever her? The next morning, I put on next morning, I put on red lipstick. The moment Ethan saw me, he paused, just for a second, then smiled. Trying something new? I shrugged. Just felt like it. He kissed my cheek, but his eyes lingered, not in desire, in calculation, like he was adjusting something in his head. Later that day, the third message came. Unknown number, red suits you, but he'll never tell you that. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Who are you? I typed again. This time, a reply. I'm the version of you he actually pays attention to. My hands went cold. What kind of sick game was this? Was someone stalking me? Pretending? Or worse, did she actually exist? I went through his phone that night. Waited until he showered. His passcode was still our anniversary, April 4th. How poetic. Inside, no messages, no photos, no calls outside of work and family. It was clean. Too clean. Like a hotel room before a guest checks in. But one app caught my eye. Vault box, hidden behind a generic calculator icon. I clicked it, prompted for a second password. I tried everything, nothing worked. Until I typed mistress. The app unlocked and inside photos, videos, messages, all of one woman. But I couldn't see her face. Every photo was from behind, hair curled, always in red, always in candlelight. Videos of her laughing, voice distorted but familiar. A wine glass clinking, a red dress sliding off her shoulder. And messages. I miss the way you hold me when she's asleep. Don't make me go back to pretending. Let's keep her blind. It's easier. I dropped the phone. My body froze. Heart screaming. Brain silent. There it was. Proof. There was another woman. Someone who knew me, someone he hid, someone he preferred. And yet, somehow, she felt familiar. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor, staring at his phone like it might burst into flames. Those messages weren't just betrayal. They were intimate, cruel, and eerily personal. Not just because he sent them, but because something about her felt off. Not like a stranger, more like a shadow. I reread the words again and again. Let's keep her blind, it's easier. Don't make me go back to pretending. They weren't mocking me, they weren't about me. They were about two people managing me. And one of them was me? The next morning, I stared into the mirror. Red lipstick, curled hair, same bathroom lighting. And for a second, just a second, I saw her. Not literally, but in the tilt of my chin, the curve of my smirk, the almost flirty look I never wore until now. My reflection didn't look like a wife. She looked like his mistress. I checked the vault box again. One video caught my eye. It was labeled simply Tuesday night. I pressed play. The angle was from a corner of a hotel room, dimly lit, classy. A woman walked in, red dress, black heels. Her back was to the camera. She turned, and my stomach twisted. I couldn't see her face clearly, but her posture, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear. I did that. Exactly like that. Every time I was nervous, I hit pause. Zoomed in on her hand, a small scar on the wrist. Faint, I had the same one. Got it when I dropped a mug 2 years ago. No, this couldn't be coincidence. This wasn't just a woman who resembled me. This was me. But I'd never been in that hotel room. I'd never worn that dress. I'd never said the things she said in the clips. At least, I didn't think I had. Unless I wasn't remembering everything. I called the hotel La Belle, asked about recent guests under Ethan's name. They refused to disclose details. So I went there in person. The concierge hesitated, then finally checked the system. Mr. Wade does have a regular reservation, she said, usually booked under his corporate account. And the woman with him? I asked. Sorry, ma'am, we don't disclose. And I slid a photo of myself across the counter. She blinked, then said slowly, Yes, you come here often. I stared at her. No, I don't. The woman frowned. I'm sorry, maybe I'm mistaken. But her eyes said something else. She wasn't mistaken. And suddenly the pieces twisted. Had I been there? Had I worn that dress? Had I become someone else without knowing it? I called my doctor, asked up for my medical records from the past year. I didn't tell them why. When the file arrived via email, I scrolled quickly and froze. Multiple prescriptions, one stood out. Zinotrex, memory stabilizer, low-dose dissociative suppressant. I'd never heard of it. Never knowingly taken it. But it was listed. Prescribed to Emma Wade. Authorized by Dr. A. Keller. My hands trembled. I had never seen that doctor. I had no recollection of visiting any clinic in the past year. But the record was there. My name, my file, my signature, or something that looked like it. I started doubting everything. What if I'd been drugged? What if there were parts of my life that I'd lived but never remembered? What if he hadn't just cheated? What if he'd rewritten me? Later that night, another message came. Unknown number. You're getting close. He won't like that. I texted back instantly. Who are you? This time, a photo came through. It was me, standing outside the hotel, from this morning. Hair up, hands in jacket, looking over my shoulder. I dropped the phone. Someone had been watching. Following. I picked it up again. Typed yards. In. Tab furiously. Why are you doing this to me? A reply. Because you deserve the truth, even if it hurts. And then a final message. Come to apartment 6B. You've been there before. You just don't remember. No name. No address. But a second later, my phone pinged with a location. A neighborhood I'd never been to. Or so I thought. Because as I stared at the address, my hands began to shake. Because a memory tried to push its way in. Red curtains, a hallway, the sound of my own voice, whispering. Don't tell her. Let me have him just one more night. The GPS led me to a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city. Not dangerous, not luxurious, just unremarkable. But as I stood outside the old brick building, something inside me shifted. A strange tug, a whisper without words. Like my body remembered something that my mind refused to. Apartment 6B. Third floor, end of the hall. Door slightly chipped near the bottom, like it had been kicked once. I stood there for minutes, keyless. Then I noticed the mat. Plain, faded, but underneath, a key. My heart thundered as I held it. No label, no note, but it fit perfectly. The door creaked open. Dark inside, dusty air, curtains closed. And yet, there it was. The scent of my perfume, the exact one I stopped using 3 years ago. I stepped inside, and I knew. I'd been here before. The apartment wasn't empty. It was lived in. Clothes in the closet, shoes by the door, wine glasses drying near the sink. The couch had a red throw blanket folded with military precision, and the bookshelf, every book I loved but had never told Ethan about. I walked to the bedroom. There was a vanity. My handwriting on a note. Midnight, wear red, don't forget to smile. The lipstick beside it? The same brand from the Vault Box video. Same shade, same gloss, same exact curve of usage. I ran my finger across it. It still felt warm. I opened the closet. 2 dresses, one black, one red, both in my size. And on the shelf above, a phone, burner style, cheap, but charged. I turned it on. No pin. Only a few messages in the inbox. From E. Same time tonight? She doesn't suspect anything. You're better than her. Yeah, you're better than her, you know. I scrolled through the call log. Every call, late nights, weekends, lunch hours, all outgoing to one number. Ethan. I stumbled back. The air felt thinner. My head throbbed. And then a flash. A memory. I was here, red dress, sitting on that couch, waiting. The door opened. Ethan walked in. No briefcase, no tie. He smiled at me like I was the only thing that mattered. And I ran to him, wrapped my arms around his neck. He whispered, my perfect escape. You're not her. You're the one I chose. My knees buckled. I gripped the vanity. No, this couldn't be. It didn't make sense. Why would I be here with him pretending to be someone else? Unless I wasn't pretending. The phone buzzed in my hand. A new message. Same unknown number. Now you understand. Check the drawer. I opened the vanity drawer. Inside, inside a failing folder. My name, but not Emma Wade. Subject EW, Phase 2 evaluation, pages and pages of notes, psych reports, observations, emotional response triggers. At the top, Dr. A. Keller, Psychological Reconstruction Division. I scanned the first few lines. Subject has responded well to conditional personality segmentation. Primary identity unaware of secondary activities. Secondary persona, codename L, displays elevated confidence, sexual responsiveness, and adaptive compliance. Warning, integration risk increasing. My vision blurred. My hands shook. L, he called me that once, in a dream. I thought it was nothing. But now I knew. L wasn't another woman. L was me. A version of me sculpted, conditioned, controlled. He hadn't cheated on me. He created a second me to fall in love with. And I lived both lives. Emma, the quiet wife. Elle, the mistress. One during the day, one at night. Ethan didn't need 2 women. He just needed control. Complete, absolute, perfect. And to do that, he split me in half. The door behind me creaked. I turned sharply, but no one was there. Just the silence again. That unbearable manufactured silence. And then I whispered out loud. I was my husband's mistress. The words tasted forced. Forced bitter. I left the apartment. Didn't lock it. Didn't look back. Because I wasn't running anymore. I was waking up. The apartment haunted me long after I left. But it wasn't the wine glasses, the red dress, or even the burner phone that stayed in my head. It was the drawer. The file. The words. Secondary persona. Codename L. Like I was a project. A controlled experiment. A woman split down the middle and repainted in red lipstick. The next day I returned. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to know more. Because if I was L, if I'd lived a second life in that apartment, then somewhere there had to be a record. And I had to find it. The drawer I hadn't opened was under the bed. A small wooden box, no lock. Just dust and fingerprints. My inside, a notebook, black. And that black leather cover, simple. The kind of thing I used to carry before marriage, before Ethan made me think journaling was a sign of emotional instability. Funny how the unstable one turned out to be him. I opened it. First page. To the part of me he didn't want to keep. From the one who survived anyway. L. My breath caught. The handwriting was mine. Slightly slanted, but undeniably mine. Only sharper, firmer. Like someone writing with purpose, not fear. I turned the page. Day 1. I woke up crying again. Emma must have taken over in the night. She always cries when he leaves. I don't. I wait, because he always comes back to me. I felt something cold crawl down my spine. Was this how far gone I was? 2 identities, 2 emotional lives, 2 truths. Page after page, Elle chronicled moments I didn't remember. Dinner dates with Ethan, phone calls full of laughter, instructions she followed without question. He likes it when I wear heels, red ones. Emma never wears them. That's why he can't stay with her too long. He says I'm his freedom, but I think I'm his prison, just one with silk sheets and praise. Sometimes I see her face in the mirror. She looks tired. I wish she'd sleep more. It makes it easier for me to stay in control. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just a diary. It was a conversation. A silent war between 2 versions of me. Emma, quiet, obedient, dismissed. L, confident, seductive, manufactured. And Ethan, he loved both, used both, played one against the other without either of us knowing. Halfway through the journal came something worse. A schedule, block the time, and odd times, color-coded, green, Emma hours, red, L. It was mapped by Ethan, noted in his handwriting. Reinforce transitions gently, use lavender to trigger Emma, use jazz to awaken L. My world spun. He didn't just cheat. He didn't just manipulate. He engineered me. The final pages were different. Rushed, frantic. He's losing control. I can feel Emma waking up too often. I saw her delete a message today. She doesn't know she wrote it. I think he's scared, and that makes me scared because if he loses control, will he still keep us both alive? I snapped the book shut. Sat on the edge of the bed. My hands trembled. My entire life, every choice, every silence, every lipstick I thought I chose had been directed by him, by suggestion, by psychology, by drugs I never knew I'd taken. But here's the cruelest part. Somewhere inside me, I had loved it. The attention, the duality, the feeling of mattering, finally, even if it was staged, even if it was fake. Because when someone makes you feel seen after years of being invisible, you hold on to it, even if it destroys you. My phone buzzed. Another message. Unknown number. Now you understand. Are you ready to meet her? I blinked. Meet who? The reply came fast. L, face to face before she disappears forever. The message was clear. L wants to meet you, face to face. But how could I meet someone who only existed inside my head? Unless she wasn't just inside me anymore. The address came in a second message. Sweet Lisette, Westbridge Psychiatric Center. A place that had been mentioned in the files, in the prescriptions, in the journal. My name was never on any patient list. But Elle's records? They were stored there. And now I was going to meet her, or whatever was left of her. I walked through the automatic glass doors, white walls, two bright lights, a silence that didn't feel peaceful. I gave the receptionist the room number. She didn't blink. She's been asking for you. I swallowed hard. Was I walking into a trap? Or into truth? Room 7A was small. One bed, one window, a single chair. And her. Me, sitting there in a red dress, hair tied back, eyes sharp. She looked exactly like me, but held herself with a kind of ease I hadn't felt in years. She turned when she saw me, and smiled. Took you long enough. I froze in the doorway. She tilted her head. You look tired. I stepped in slowly. What is this, some kind of sick therapy session? She laughed. No, darling, this is your intervention. I sat down, our knees almost touching. It was like looking into a time capsule, or a mirror that remembered what I wanted to forget. You're not real, I whispered. She raised an eyebrow. Then how do I know about the scar on your hip, or the man in the gray suit you kissed before Ethan, or the time you nearly ran away at 19 but stayed because your mother cried? I said nothing, because I remembered those things too, but I never told anyone, not even myself. She leaned forward, eyes gentle now. I'm not your enemy, Emma. I'm your survival instinct. He created you, I said. She nodded. He triggered me, but I was always there. You just buried me under silence and good behavior. He used you. He used us, but I made sure we felt something, even if it was just power in a red dress. I wanted to scream, cry, let leave, but I didn't, because something inside me felt drawn to her, like I was seeing a version of myself I'd always wanted to be. Unafraid, unapologetic, untouchable. Why did you let him get away with it? I asked. She shrugged. Because you weren't ready to remember, and I wasn't ready to disappear. What happens now? She smiled sadly. Yeah, I know. You take it all back. Your memories, your name, your power. She reached under the bed, pulled out a small box. Inside, a flash drive. Everything. All the videos, the notes, the recordings, what he did to us. I stared at it. The weight of 100 truths compressed into 1 inch of plastic. Why give it to me? Because I'm tired, and I trust you to carry us forward. I stood. She stood too. Two identical women finally facing the same direction. Will I see you again? I asked. She smiled. Only when you need me, but I'll always be part of you. Because I'm not a glitch, Emma. I'm your strength, your fire, your no. She leaned in, kissed at my cheek, and whispered, Now go, burn him down with everything we know. As I walked out, I felt whole in a way I'd never known. Not split, not broken, just integrated. For the first time, I didn't want to be just Emma. I wanted to be all of me, even the messy parts, even the dark ones, even the red lipstick. That night, I plugged the drive into my laptop and watched him, not in horror, but in clarity. I saw what he did, how he trained me, twisted me, made me believe I had choices. But Elle had kept records. She had left a map. And now I was ready to follow it all the way to his destruction. The flash drive sat in my hand like a ticking bomb. Inside it was everything: videos, notes, voice memos, proof of his control, his manipulation, his sick science experiment of me. I watched one video at a time: a hidden camera in our bedroom, another in the red apartment. Two versions of me, two realities, both orchestrated by one man. Ethan's voice played like background music in every scene. Emma's still asleep. Elle's awake tonight. Subject is responding well to behavioral cues. Sexuality increases with deprivation. Split maintained, memory still compartmentalized. I should have felt rage, but instead, I felt nothing. Just a sharp, focused cold. Because this wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was war. I compiled everything into a single file. Sent it to 3 people. My lawyer, a journalist who specializes in psychological abuse cases, myself, just to remind me this happened to me because of him, and now it ends. That night, I asked Ethan to meet me for dinner. Neutral ground, a rooftop restaurant he used to take Elle to. I wore red, the same shade, but not for him. For her, for me, for closure. He arrived, smug as ever, tie perfect, smile rehearsed. "You look beautiful," he said. "Do I?" I replied. He sat across from me like nothing had happened, like we were still in his fantasy, still dancing to his script. He poured the wine, raised a glass. "To new beginnings?" I smiled. "To endings." He blinked. "What do you mean?" I slid the flash drive across the table. "Everything's on there." He didn't touch it, just stared. "You went back," he said quietly. I remembered, I corrected. His jaw clenched. "You weren't supposed to. You were happier not knowing." "I was never happy. I was obedient. There's a difference." He leaned forward. "You're not thinking clearly. You've always had these episodes." I laughed. "Stop. You don't get to gaslight me anymore." I stood up. "You split me into 2. Loved the parts you could manipulate, discarded the ones that made you feel small." He stood too, desperate now. "I gave you freedom. Elle was everything you wanted to be. No, Elle was everything you wanted to control." He reached for my arm. I stepped back. People were watching. But I didn't care, because I wanted them to see. "You're finished," I said. "This is going public." His eyes narrowed. "You really think this ends with me? You think I did this alone?" My blood ran cold. "What?" He smirked. "You think I'm the only one who wanted you this way? The only one who approved it?" I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" He leaned in. "Check the funding behind Keller's clinic, the trial, the name on the contract. You'll recognize it." He turned to leave. "I was just the handler, sweetheart. You were signed over by someone closer than you think." The air left my lungs. I stood frozen. The drive was still on the table, unclaimed, because the real threat had just begun. Back at home. At home, I searched, pulled up Keller's clinic, scanned financial records, and there it was. Funding provided by W&E Biomedical Ventures. My heart slammed. Wade and Ellis, my family name, my father's firm. I dug deeper. Board members, investors, and then I saw it. Primary stakeholder, Richard Ellis, my uncle. I dropped the laptop, stumbled back. Ethan didn't start this. He executed it. But the blueprint, it came from my own bloodline. A new message pinged. "Unknown number. You're not done. You've only just peeled the first layer." I replied, "Who are you?" "The one who watched over you when no one else did. Check the last page of the journal." I raced to the apartment, flipped open Elle's notebook. And at the very last page, "If you're reading this, you've found all the pieces. Now it's time to rebuild. You don't need me anymore, but I'll always be part of you. E." Not L, E. But it wasn't Ethan. The handwriting was different. And under it, a signature. One I hadn't seen in years. My mother's. The signature was unmistakable. Margaret Ellis Wade, my mother. Elegant cursive, slightly slanted, just like the way she used to sign Christmas cards. But this wasn't a holiday greeting. This was a final message. A warning. Or a confession. I stared at the page again. "You don't need me anymore, but I'll always be part of you." I didn't know whether to cry or tear the journal apart, because if my mother left this here, that meant she knew everything. The next morning, I drove to her house. Not the one I grew up in, the one she'd retreated to after Dad passed, quiet, neatly trimmed hedges, curtains always drawn. She answered the door like she expected me, wearing pearl earrings and an expression that had always seemed too calm. "Emma," she said gently. "You knew," I said. No preamble, no politeness, just the truth. She didn't deny it. She stepped aside. "Come in." The house smelled like jasmine. Everything was in place, nothing out of order, just like her. We sat in the living room. She poured tea, like it was a normal day. "It was supposed to help you," she said finally. "Help me what?" I snapped. "Forget myself?" She looked down. "To become more than yourself. The plan was never meant to hurt you. It was to enhance you, protect you from what happened to me." I froze. "What happened to you?" She took a slow breath. Then she said something I never expected. "I was an L too." Silence. Then, "Your father never knew, but my family, the Ellis line, we've been part of this project for generations. Emotional segmentation, personality control. It started as trauma research, then became something else." "You signed me into it," I whispered. She nodded slowly. "When you were 15. After your breakdown, you don't remember it. We made sure of that." A memory flickered. White walls, a cold room, my finger scratching something into the wall. A word. "Not me," I gasped. "You erased part of me." "No," she said firmly. "We preserved you, split the pain from the core, created resilience. The version of you that could survive, that's L." That's not survival," I said. That's division, that's control." She looked down at her tea. "We didn't know what Ethan would do. He was only meant to study the patterns, not manipulate them, but he got obsessed. And you let him marry me. It wasn't supposed to be real. He wasn't supposed to touch the core. He was only supposed to test L." I stood. My body trembled. "You give me to him, like a lab rat, like a doll with removable parts." She didn't deny it, only said, "You were stronger than me, Emma. I fractured permanently. I never reintegrated. That's why I'm so quiet, so numb." And for the first time, I saw it, not the coldness, the emptiness. She reached for my hand. I pulled back. "I'm not you," I said. "I'm not your experiment or his." "No," she said, "you're better." She stood and walked to the bookshelf, pulled out an envelope, handed it to me. "This is everything. The research, the contracts, the names. Shut it down." "Why now? Then, now?" I asked. "Because you're the only one who can." That night, I opened the envelope and found a document labeled Phase 4 Proposal Global Application. Behind it, names, dates, corporate sponsors, clinical sites in 5 countries. They weren't done. They were scaling up, using me as a success story. I opened the drive again, reread Elle's journal, looked at my mother's note, and realized this wasn't just about healing or closure. This was bigger. A machine built on fractured women being studied like lab rats and called breakthroughs. And now I would burn it to the ground. There are memories that don't just fade. They're buried, locked, chained in the basement of your mind because facing them might shatter the person you've become. But sometimes you need to shatter so you can rebuild. I lay in bed with the envelope beside me. The research, the proposals, the evidence that my life had been a test subject's journey. But it wasn't enough to shut them down. Not yet. I needed to remember. I needed to go back. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the drawer at the bottom of my closet, the one with old journals, childhood drawings, and a single photo I never understood. Me, in a hospital gown, 15 years old, eyes swollen, wrist bandaged. The back of the photo read, "Margaret E. Wade, Phase 1 Success." They had named the trauma, framed it like a milestone. That night, I lit a candle, sat on the floor, closed my eyes, and whispered to myself, "Show me." At first, there was only darkness. Then, a white room, flashing lights, a woman in a lab coat, voices behind a glass wall. "She's rejecting the merge. We need to separate." "Is she stable?" "Barely. Sedate her." Then pain. Not physical, mental. Like someone taking scissors to my mind, splitting me, tearing me in two. And then a voice. Familiar. Gentle. "It's okay, sweetheart. This is for your own good." I opened my eyes in the memory. It was her. My mother. Younger, less cold, but just as complicit. The next scene was a hallway. I was strapped to a gurney, screaming, "I'm not me! I'm not me! Bring me back!" And in the mirror, as they wheeled me past, I saw her, the first version of else. Smiley, the memory shifted. Another scene, a therapy room, Dr. Keller sitting across from me. "You will respond to the name Elle during evening sessions. Emma will rest. Elle will grow." He showed me a red dress. "This is your armor. Tears slid down my face as I watched it all replay. I hadn't chosen any of this. They had written my story before I even knew what chapters meant. I had been split, programmed, restrained, but never erased, because deep down, Emma and Elle always remembered each other, always tried to return. I opened my eyes. Trembling, soaked in sweat, but awake, fully. I stood in front of the mirror. For the first time, I saw everything. The girl who was broken at 15, the woman who tried to be perfect, the shadow self who wore red and dared to take space. All of us. One, I called my lawyer. I have everything. I'm ready to go public. Then I called the reporter. This isn't just a marriage scandal, it's an intergenerational experiment. I'm ready to tell the world. And finally, I called Ethan. He didn't answer, so I left a message. I remember now everything, including what you're afraid the world will see. You tried to make me yours, but I was never yours. I was stolen. You don't get to write my ending. I do. The next day, I packed a suitcase. Not to run, to stand. I booked a flight to Geneva, where the next phase of trials was being quietly launched. I had names now, dates, records, and a voice. At the airport, I wore no makeup, no lipstick, no armor, just me, all of me. And as I boarded the plane, I thought of that night in the White Room and whispered, "You didn't break me, you split me, but I found my way back." The tapes arrived in a plain cardboard box. No return address, no signature, just a post-it on top. If you're ready, press play. I didn't know if it was Ethan or Elle or someone else entirely, but I knew I had to watch. Because inside these tapes was the last layer of the truth, the part I hadn't seen, the part he'd tried to bury. There were 5 tapes, labeled not by date, but by phases. Phase 1 is an awakening, phase 2, conditioning phase, phase 3, obedience, phase 4, resistance, phase 5, integration attempt, failed. My breath caught at that last word. Failed. I inserted the first tape into the player. Static. Then, a clean room, a woman in red. Me, but not quite. Not the Emma I knew, not even the Elle I'd accepted. A version between. Like watching myself through another lens. Phase 1, awakening. In the video, I sat in a therapy chair. Eyes glazed, responding to commands. What's your name? Elle. Do you remember Emma? She's the tired one. I shivered. This wasn't acting and it wasn't role play. It was programming, pure, clinical, invasive. Phase 2, conditioning. Ethan appeared on camera. Smiling, soft-voiced. I said, do you trust me? Yeah. Who keeps you safe? You. Who do you serve? You. I covered my mouth. It was me, answering like a soldier, like a puppet, and worst of all, like someone in love. Phase 3, obedience. Now we were in the apartment, the red one. Ethan brought flowers, wine. I know I rented her, and that's everything. And then he whispered, "You're not like her. You don't cry, you don't question, you don't leave." And Elle replied, "I never want to." Phase 4, resistance. This one was different. The scene opened to me pacing, scratching my arms, sweating. "Where is she?" I said aloud. I feel her. I feel her." Ethan entered the room. I turned on him. "You lied. I'm not whole. I'm a cutout." He slapped me. Hard. I stumbled. And whispered, "Emma's waking up." I paused the tape. Tears burned, but I didn't let them fall. That was the moment, when Elle fought back, when the system cracked. Phase 5, integration, attempt, failed. The final tape. Emma and Elle and me sat in a split-screen therapy setup. 2 sessions stitched together, trying to force harmony. Keller's voice echoed in the background. "We've pushed too far. They're overlapping. She's remembering at the wrong time." Then, "Ethan, shut it down. We'll reinforce separation." But the last clip. It was me, looking straight into the hidden camera, expression unreadable. And I said calmly, "You can split me 100 times, but one day I'll put myself back together, and when I do, you'll wish I stayed broken." I ejected the tape. The room was silent, but inside me, the storm had never been louder. This wasn't just manipulation. It was a manufactured prison, built by scientists, funded by family, executed by a man I once called husband. But I wasn't his anymore. I wasn't theirs. I backed up the footage, encrypted it, sent copies to my lawyer, the journalist, and the authorities. Attached one line, "Consent was never given, identity was never respected. The subject is now the storyteller." Then I packed a second bag, not for escape, but for confrontation, because there was one person I hadn't seen yet, Dr. A. Keller, the man who started it all, The man who told Ethan how to break me. He was still alive. And I had an appointment. I found him in Switzerland, not hiding, but thriving. Dr. A. Keller now headed a prestigious behavioral institute, polished reputation, international funding, featured on mental health panels as a pioneer of emotional segmentation therapy. He was building a global brand based on the same methods he used to split me in half. I didn't want revenge. I wanted a truth, and I wanted him to say it out loud. I requested a private session under a pseudonym, said I was a donor, interested in seeing his work. He welcomed me with a smile and that same soft, dangerous voice from the tapes. How can I help today? I didn't answer at first, just stared at the wall. The diplomas, the awards, the framed photo of him shaking hands with world leaders. So much power built on quiet cruelty. Then I turned to him. Do you remember subject EW? He paused, eyes flickering, but only for a second. I'm afraid I don't recall individual cases. That was years ago. I leaned in. Phase 1, 15-year-old girl, emotional fracture, split identities, core suppression. You named her Emma and you created L. He froze. No denial this time. Just recognition. You're her. No, I said, I'm both and neither. I'm what happens when your system fails. I'm what happens when your subjects survive. He straightened in his chair, voice colder. If you're here to blackmail, I'm not here to blackmail. I'm here to end this. I pulled out the flash drive, the contracts, the video clips, the research logs with his signature. Everything's been sent to Interpol and to every journalist in Europe who's ever whispered your name. He glanced at the files. This will cost millions in lawsuits and hundreds in apologies. Start drafting. He leaned back. For the first time, he looked small. Not like a doctor, not like a genius, just a man who built his empire on stolen minds. You could have disappeared, he said quietly. Lived your life, moved on. I did move on, but not by forgetting, by choosing. Choosing me, all of me. Even Elle? Especially her, she's the one who woke me up. I stood to leave. Stopped at the door. You tried to rewrite me, doctor, but I took the pen back, and I rewrote you instead. Then I walked out. Free, not just from him, but from the last thread tying me to the version of myself they created. Weeks later, the story went viral. The woman who was her own mistress, headlines called it the scandal of the decade. Psychology's darkest chapter. Keller was suspended. Ethan was under criminal investigation. And me? I started speaking. To women, to survivors, to girls who thought they were too broken to matter. I began with this. My name is Emma L. Wade. I was split, controlled, programmed to obey, and I loved a man who used both my faces against each other. But now I am whole, and I chose every part of me that they told me to forget. Years later, I stood on a TEDx stage, same red dress, same voice, but now it was mine. They tried to turn me into two women, one quiet, one perfect, but neither of them were free. So I chose something they never expected. I chose to be both. In the audience that night, a young woman stood up, tears in her eyes. How did you forgive them? I smiled gently. I didn't. I released them so I could carry something better, myself. Backstage, backstage, I sat alone and not lonely, whole. I pulled out Elle's final journal entry, the one she left just before the merge. If you ever find peace, light one candle, not for me, but for us. I lit one that night. It flickered, then burned steady. And for the first time and forever, and so did I.